is nigh. We lived through it once before, the end of the world. When the Oblivion Gates opened, we thought it would be the end of Nirn, but my people were strong, and the Hist guided us. We took the fight to the Daedra. We invaded Oblivion before they could invade us. We defeated them back then, but still they remain. Across Tamriel, there are still those who dedicate themselves to the dark gods. They do not see the Daedra for the devils they are. The fools build shrines to them, praying for promises of corrupt power. These weak-minded sinners will destroy us all. There is only one course of action to take to save the world. We must kill the worshippers. We must banish the Daedra. We must send them all back to Oblivion. The skills for this build are one-handed, enchanting, smithing, heavy armour and archery, and their relative importance is in the order I just listed them, with one-handed being the main focus and archery being more of a supplementary skill. I had the most investment in the one-handed skill tree, with all 5 ranks of armsmen doubling the damage of one-handed attacks. As this is a dual-wielding build, I also picked up a rank of dual flurry in order to boost the swing speed of dual-wielding attacks. Really, I should have picked up both ranks, but I genuinely just forgot that there was a second rank I could purchase. Fortunately, I didn't forget about dual savagery, which makes it so dual-wielding power attacks gain a 50% damage boost. Seeing as power attacks are the best form of DPS we have, I also decided to make them easier to perform by picking up Fighting Stance, reducing the stamina cost of power attacks. And finally, for this skill tree, I had Savage Strike, making power attacks deal more damage if you're standing still, and also giving you a chance to behead. The second most important skill for the build is Enchanting. The Enchanter perk will boost the strength of all enchantments by 20% per rank. I only had a few ranks invested, but that's still a 60% boost to every enchantment. Elemental effects are a big deal for this build, so I also picked up Fire Enchanter, which makes all flame-based enchantments more potent, and Frost Enchanter, which does the same for ice-based enchantments. I didn't end up going for the Storm one, as I was more focused on the other 2 elements, but there's always an option if you take this build to a higher level. Smithing is the other crafting skill you'll want to invest into with this build, though there's only a few perks you'll need. First of these is Steel Smithing, though this is only to reach the actually useful perk of Dwarven Smithing. This will allow us to craft and improve almost all of our gear, drastically improving both defense and attack. I also picked up Arcane Blacksmith, allowing us to improve enchanted items. This means you also are allowed to improve the mask you wear, but also means that improvements can still be made to equipment after you've enchanted it. The Heavy Armour skill is all about defense, with each rank of a Juggernaut perk boosting armor rating by 20%. An even more efficient boost to armor rating comes from the Well Fitted perk, which gives a 25% increase, but only if you're wearing all heavy armor, which this build does. And the final skill is Archery, where I only invested a couple of points into a single perk, Overdraw. With 2 ranks of this we get a 40% damage increase to shots with our bow. Archery isn't the focus of the build, but instead just a secondary way to deal with enemies, so you don't want to waste too many perk points here. This character wields a variety of different Dwarven one-handed weapons, each enchanted to be most effective against different types of Daedra. On one weapon I had the Banish enchantment, which instantly destroys weaker Daedra. On some weapons I had Fire damage in order to deal with Frost Atronachs, and on other weapons I had Frost damage in order to deal with Flame Atronachs. Storm Atronachs don't have a specific weakness, nor do most other Daedra, so I ended up putting Chaos damage on a couple of other weapons, as this gives you a chance to deal Fire, Frost, and Shock damage all in one. As well as having to make some choices as to which enchantments you'll add onto your weapons, you also need to decide which types of one-handed weapons to use. Swords swing the fastest but deal the least damage, maces are heavy hitters but swing noticeably slower, and axes are a good middle ground between the two. There's no right or wrong choices here, but I like to have a good mix of a trio to fit in with the idea of having a different weapon for different types of Daedra. You will also need a bow of some kind, and I went with a Dwarven bow enchanted with Fiery Soul Trap. This is an upgraded form of Soul Trap, which also deals 10 points of fire damage regardless of enchantment level. In order to get this you'll need to head to Ironbind Barrow, but the trip is well worth it. Along with the bow itself, you also have a variety of arrows to use. As I'm playing on Anniversary Edition, I had access to elemental arrows, meaning I could pick the right element to counter Atronachs. If you're not playing on Anniversary Edition, then you may instead want to switch to an enhanced Dwarven crossbow, as there are exploding elemental bolts you can use as long as you have the Dawnguard DLC. The first piece of armour for the build is its namesake, Otar. This item provides a 30% resistance effect against fire, frost and shock, making you a tougher target to take down for daedra who rely on elemental attacks. To add on to this, you should also enchant yourself a ring and a necklace with elemental resistance effects, in order to ensure you're negating more than half of the damage you would have been dealt. I elected to go with Dwarven armour with this build as it melded best with the mask, and as I'm on Anniversary Edition, I was able to use an alternate version of this set named Dwarven Plate Armour. The boots were enchanted with the final bit of elemental resistance, and for the main armour piece I went with Fortify Health, all in all making us a lot tougher than most who wander Skyrim. For the gauntlets I went with Fortify One-Handed in order to get a hefty damage boost, and I also went with the Brawler variant, as this gives me the option to not have any weapon equipped and do a bit of extra unarmed damage instead. This isn't something to focus on for the build, but I did like the idea of not having to waste my weapon charge on any incredibly weak enemies that were bothering me. The standing stone for this build is the Steed Stone. Not only will the extra carry weight it provides allow you to lug around more weapons easier, but the removal of worn armour weight is a pretty big deal for heavily armoured characters like this one. This stone will make you feel much lighter than normal, and provide plenty of room for looting, and what Skyrim player doesn't like the sound of that? When it comes to levelling up, I would recommend evenly splitting your levels between health and stamina, up until you reach 200 points of stamina, and then you can focus entirely on health. While this character isn't forbidden from using magic, I just didn't find myself using any spells, so there's no need to invest into magicka at all. A large health pool will go a long way, and as this character is an Argonian, they do have the Hiss Skin power, allowing you to regen that large health bar nice and fast. Speaking of powers for this build, I first want to recommend a passive one, Agent of Mara. This can be gained by doing the Book of Love quest, started at the Temple of Mara in Riften, and once this is completed, you will gain a permanent 15% magic resistance. This is an insanely good effect, and will stack with the elemental resistances we already have. In terms of activated powers, there are a few shouts that work well with this build. Both Fire and Frost Breath can be good ways to deal some extra elemental damage in a pinch, though the shout I ended up using most often was Whirlwind Sprint. This allows you to close the distance on enemies that are trying to back away from you, as there's no worse feeling than missing your dual-wielding power attacks because an enemy stepped backwards. The ideal faction for this character to join would technically be the Vigilance of Stendarr. Unfortunately, they're not a full-fledged faction in Skyrim, and since the introduction of the Dawnguard DLC, their luck has got even worse. Do try and help out any members of the Vigil you see on your travels, as they do share the same goal as you. In terms of questlines to follow, I think that the Dragonborn DLC is probably the best place to look, as fighting against Miraak will have you facing down Seekers and Lurkers, both types of daedra that seem to come from Apocrypha. Miraak seems more than happy to use daedra to invade Tamriel with, so defeating him should be a priority. The follower I picked for this build was Dakithus, as he's the only Argonian follower in the game. I equipped him with a full set of Dwarven Mail, which is the light armour variant of Dwarven armour, added with one of the alternate armour packs in Anniversary Edition. I also was able to give him an Orcish crossbow for some extra stopping power, and some of my old Dwarven weapons too. The bow is probably the most important piece to focus on, as Dakithus is a Ranger class of follower, and will tend to gravitate towards a bow even more than your standard Skyrim follower will do. If you enchant his bow with the Fiery Soul Trap enchantment we picked up, then you can also give him your empty soul gems, and have soul gems filled up for you passively as you travel, as every kill he gets should fill a gem. Otar is an aggressive daedra hunting warrior. He wants to seek out any daedra and their worshippers, and eliminate them without mercy. The defensive side of this build comes from a high armour rating, incredibly high elemental resistances, and a healthy pool of hit points, none of which are things you need to focus on too much in the middle of a fight, allowing you to give your attention to dealing as much damage as possible with a flurry of power attacks. The DPS of this build is incredibly high, as dual-wielding power attacks give you a trio of strikes if you can get them all to hit. I would recommend adding all of your weapons to the favourites bar, so that you can scroll through them easily and switch between depending on the type of enemy you're facing. There's arguably a few too many weapons to switch between to be worth hotkeying them, but that instead means you can save your hotkeys for things like healing potions and vegetable soup. On the role-playing side of things, you just want to kill any daedra you come across. Annoyingly, I couldn't find any aggressive elemental Atronachs while I was playtesting, which is a bit of a problem when the whole conceit was for this character to be specialised at fighting them. Still, it did force me to think about what other types of enemies I should be setting my sights on, namely Daedra worshippers. Conjurers and Malika are easy enemies to face down against, as you'll find them scattered throughout Skyrim, and I was led to Solstheim in order to fight against the menace there. But a less conventional enemy were orcs. The tribes of orcs you will find sheltered away in the strongholds all worship the Daedric prince Malakath, and as such, are Daedra worshippers, and that means you're going to need to wipe out all the strongholds if you want to remove all forms of Daedra worship from Skyrim. Feel free to suggest in the comments any other groups which may contain Daedra worshippers, as that sort of witch hunt fueled comment section is exactly the sort of thing this character would act upon. Thank you all for watching my latest cinematic Skyrim build. There will of course be another one coming next month, so I hope you'll all subscribe and look forward to that. Make sure to hit the like button if you enjoyed this one, and as always, thanks for watching. Sarge out.